An eccentric, recluse millionaire just up and vanished in Rhode Island in 1987. But 10 years later, they were found. But was this person still alive? Hello, true crimerers. This is the case of Cam Lyman. Viewer discretion is advised. Cam Lyman was born on September 4th, 1932 in Westwood, Massachusetts. Cam's father, Arthur T. Lyman, was a very well-to-do aristocrat, businessman, every job person. He was considered very well connected in all of the right places with all of the right people. He at one point was commissioner of corrections, and then he was also commissioner of conservation. Arthur, like his family before him, they had a shit ton of money. It was a very wealthy family. They were well off. Arthur also had a passion for show dogs, something that he would eventually instill in one of his kids, Cam. Cam's mom, well, not so great, apparently. She would tell Cam that Cam was an unwanted child. Always good to hear that from your own parent. Cam was the youngest of 4 siblings, and they refer to Cam as the nickname Butch, mainly because Cam was naturally built, very just like brawny. Cam also loved playing sports, so that's another reason why. Cam was considered a relatively quiet student, didn't really do a whole lot to cause any scenes, but that being said, Cam was known to have the occasional explosive temper. But Cam would get through school, would graduate high school, and then eventually went on to Hollins College. But after a year, Cam dropped out and moved back in with the folks. At this point, Cam constantly bickered with Mom. Again, the mom just didn't seem to want Cam around. To help ease Cam's mind a bit, Arthur bought Cam a show dog. And then another. And then another. And then another. This family really loved dogs, and show dogs especially. Cam's parents were always entertaining guests at this huge, lavish mansion estate of theirs. But Cam, during all of this, typically would just keep to themselves. Unfortunately, in 1968, Arthur T. Lyman would pass away after a battle with cancer. And this hit Cam pretty hard, actually. This would kind of put Cam on this like downward spiral emotionally. Cam would then start wearing Arthur's, old clothes, the t-shirts, pants, all that, to apparently look more masculine. Something that Mom Susan found kind of disturbing and disgusting. Another win from good old Mom, huh? Eventually, Susan would force Cam out of the house after she bought a ranch house across the street and then just sort of shoved Cam over there. Susan could not stand seeing Cam dress in manlier clothing, and especially could not stand the fact that Cam was showing an attraction to women. This is because Cam was born Camilla Lyman, assigned female at birth. And that is the only time you're going to hear me say his dead name. Just wanted to say it for clarification and just so you understood the story. Cam's mom eventually planned to rid herself of Cam by selling the big house and moving far away and just leaving Cam to do whatever it is that Cam is going to do. But before she could go along with that plan, she would die in 1973, natural causes. Which means that Cam, he inherited the big old 100-acre Lyman estate mansion. His other siblings had moved out of the house. They had lived, with their own families and their own big houses. Cam and his siblings, there's a big trust fund. They all got paid, their trust money. So they're all doing very well for themselves financially, and that included Cam. His siblings wanted him to stay in that ranch house so they could figure out what else to do with this gigantic estate. What's one person like Cam going to do with this huge estate? But before that could happen, there was a house fire at the ranch house, and Cam had to move back into the large estate. This was a huge house, by the way. This was built in the late 1700s, if I'm understanding correctly. And basically it was a Lyman family inheritance, one right after the other. So it was in the Lyman family for like centuries, or I guess like a century and a half. The family wanted to preserve the house in terms of like it being a historical monument of sorts. So what they would do is they would donate the home, even though, Cam was still living in it, they donated the house to historic New England. That way it could never be like demolished or anything like that. It would always be there. The estate could also be like physically sold to another owner. But again, it would maintain its historic aspect. But Cam, at this point, would start breeding dogs. He would start taking these dogs to, to shows, like Best in Show, that kind of thing. And he slowly seemed to phase people out, especially after the death of both of his parents. And he seemed to be more in tune with the dogs he kept. I can relate to that. So he became a true dog person, and just like people like out, go away. Wow, he sounds a lot like me actually. But he also at the same time started to let the estate go. It was, collecting weeds. It wasn't being cleaned. It just wasn't being kept up because Cam just didn't really seem to care about that aspect of it. So his siblings, his family, they just kind of felt this was very concerning, and it was leading to a concerning thing. He very quickly just became a recluse with zero desire to interact with humanity. But in the times that his family did go over and see him, whenever they interacted, Cam would always be wearing, dressed head to toe in men's clothing. They also noticed he started to have like a pencil thin mustache. His voice was getting deeper and deeper. So the belief was that Cam started to take animal steroids to kind of become more, of the manlier. However, there is no records that Cam ever actually went through with any kind of physical gender reassignment surgery. He was just allegedly taking the steroids without the help of a doctor or a medical professional. He was sort of doing it on his own. By late 1981, Cam would meet an individual by the name of George O'Neill. They met because of some dog show, and so they just sort of started talking. George was married. He had a bunch of dogs himself, so they just got along really well. And yeah, the two just became really fast friends, but it's something that Cam's family found to be very odd because, Cam, like I've said, he didn't want to interact with people. He was just sort of a homebody. It was just very odd that he suddenly had this really good friend. Very quickly, Cam would end up hiring George O'Neill to be the estate's caretaker. And not only for physically taking care of the place, but Cam would also have George take care of like the finances in terms of like paying all of the essential bills to keep everything up and running. Yeah, George just became his number one and only confidant. In 1984, George would help convince Cam to sell the family estate. And he did. He sold the big house. And then Cam would buy a new property, a 40-acre estate in Hopkinton, Rhode Island. I don't know if I said that city right. I apologize if I butchered it. And then after this move, his family almost never physically saw him. They would speak to each other over the phone, several times. Cam would always send Christmas cards to the family, birthday cards, that kind of thing. He did it like clockwork. He never missed it. Until 1987. The phone calls, the birthday cards, the Christmas cards, all stopped completely, just dead in their tracks. No warning, no heads up, hey, I'm going out of the country, nothing. The Lyman estate, or the trust fund, I guess, you know, they would always have like physical checks mailed to Cam. But soon the family would notice, they would realize, they would find out, I guess, that these checks were no longer being endorsed by Cam's signature. They were just being endorsed with an account number to a different bank account in Rhode Island. Something that was it was just like a little strange. So the family, especially like his sister, tried reaching out to Cam, but he never answered the phone. Or if, let's say, someone else answered the phone, like George or a member of the staff, they would just say, oh, we haven't seen him. He's just out, I guess. Very vague. So it wouldn't be until about a year later, 1988, that's when the family finally said, all right, we're reporting him missing because we haven't heard from him. I don't know if they actually ever traveled to the house in Rhode Island. I don't know. But regardless, it was a year from when they realized he was missing till when they reported him actually missing. Detectives in Rhode Island, they would travel to Cam's house and they confirmed that Cam was not there. So they spoke to the house's staff and they all said that they hadn't seen him in a while. They weren't specific on how long it's been, but they said they just haven't seen him. And I think it's because they were told, because police then question George O'Neill, and he tells them that, well, Cam, he flew to Europe, and because he's finally getting gender reassignment surgery. He's getting it done. And that's probably what he told the staff, and the staff just believed it. But when police asked George if he had any proof of this, like the proof of an airline ticket being purchased, could he show the financials of like him paying physically for the gender reassignment surgery? Because it certainly wasn't going to be cheap and it would be like an obvious thing on a bank account. George couldn't prove any of it. He had nothing to show them. Cam's family then dug deeper and hired like a private investigator to look into the financial aspects of this and where was the trust money actually going. Well, turns out that money since 1987, July of 1987, was being deposited into the bank account of George O'Neill. They also found out that Cam had made George his power of attorney. They also discovered that Cam was in the process of trying to make George his sole inheritor to the estate and all of his money. Once George was confronted with all of this information, he changed his tune. He said in July of 1987, he and Cam were talking on the phone and they got into a massive argument about all of the dogs. Then he said Cam just angrily hung up the phone call. And then the next day, George went to Cam's house and he said that the phone was ripped off the wall and was just thrown across the room. Like he just ripped it out of anger and just broke it. But Cam wasn't at the house and the staff didn't know where he was, according to George. He said, Cam probably just took off and to go clear his head. He does this all the time. He just goes out and he's gone for days and days and days. Okay, well, he's been gone for over a year now at this point, so... And his family wasn't buying any of this either because, like I've said, they knew Cam was this recluse. He was a person who did not like interacting with other people whenever he could avoid it. He couldn't always avoid it, but whenever he could, he would. They also said there is no chance in hell that Cam would have flown to Europe to get gender reassignment surgery because he wouldn't even go to his own primary care doctor for anything basic. He didn't trust people and he didn't like people. So they weren't buying this, all of these stories that George was telling them. Not to mention the fact that even though Cam was distant, he was still close with his family in terms of like if he were to pick up and leave and just fly to Europe, he would tell his family. He would communicate that to them. He wouldn't leave them hanging like that. Cam loved his dogs, and he had a lot of dogs. He, like I've said, loved his dogs more than he loved humans. I can relate. A lot of us can. Cam would never in a million years just pick up and leave all of his dogs. He just wouldn't do it, especially without doing anything to, make sure the dogs were being taken care of. And he made no such arrangements. But police had no proof that Cam met with any kind of foul play. They had no proof that Cam didn't pick up and leave on his own accord. They had nothing. What they did have, however, was the fact that George O'Neill was embezzling money from Cam's estate. So they did charge him with embezzlement because he embezzled somewhere around $15,000 to $20,000 when it was all said and done. George would plead guilty to that. He pled guilty, and he spent a grand total of 0 days in prison. Yeah, he was sentenced to 1 year probation. That's nice. And he was fined a whopping $450. Wow. Okay, so he stole a bunch of money from a guy who's missing, and he stole the money after the person went missing. But yeah, fuck it. Just get out of here, scamp. And they kept asking him, "Where's Cam? You must know where he is. Where is he?" And he just kept saying, "I don't know. I don't know, he's gone." However, people would say that George came off very confident in that he would say, like, "Cam's out there, he's fine, he's alive. I know he's out there, probably just traveling around. He'll be back soon. Everything is fine. I know he's alive and well. He's just out there somewhere in the world." Well, turns out Cam was actually a lot closer to home than most realized. Turns out he was still on the property. In 1995, the family would have Cam declared legally deceased, and then they were able to successfully manage to make sure that George did not inherit any of the estate, given the whole, like, he stole money and all that. So they were able to, surpass all of those obstacles. So he was declared dead. And then the estate was sold, and this was sometime around 1997. In 1997, the family also managed to get the authorities to reopen this case of this missing person, and they did so. Now, the property was owned now by a man named Greg Siner, if I said his last name right, Siner. So the police had gone to the property. They asked Greg, "Hey, can we search the grounds just to, because, a man who used to live here went missing and we just need to look." And he's like, "Yeah, absolutely, go for it." The same day they're searching the property is also when Greg was sort of out on the estate, and he started to notice a very pungent, very obvious odor. And he didn't really know exactly where it was coming from. So he kept using his, his sniffer to kind of locate it, and it was just getting worse and worse. And he found out that it was coming from a sewage area that was on the property. And as this is going on, the police are they're also something's odd, something smells off. And they would eventually figure out that the smell, the odor, was coming from the property's septic tank. It was September 24th, 1997. And it was about 10 years or so after Cam had vanished off the face of the earth. When everyone got to the septic tank, they opened it, and they found what the strong odor was. It was the smell of a fully decomposed human body floating in the septic tank. And it was actually kind of stuffed in the septic tank. It wasn't necessarily just freely floating, so it was obviously put there by someone. It would take some time to remove the body from the septic tanks without disturbing anything. And then it would take a much longer time after this to find out exactly who this person was. And dental records would confirm in October of 1998 that this was, in fact, the body of Cam Lyman. The coroner would rule that the manner of death was homicide, but the cause of death could not really be determined due to the state of the remains, there just wasn't much left. They did determine that just through the decomp and all that, that he had likely been in there since he was last seen by staff in July of 1987. So that means the obvious suspect, of course, is George O'Neill. He had lied repeatedly about Cam's whereabouts. He had embezzled at least $15,000 out of Cam's account. He tried to get him to make him his sole inheritor of all of his estate. And he kept telling people that he was sure Cam was alive. He was out there and he was fine. Trust me, he's fine. He wasn't. Police also suspected two other caretakers, John and Judy Weeks, were in on it with George O'Neill. But there was not one single shred of physical evidence. There was, like I said, they could not determine the actual cause of death. They just know that Cam Lyman did not stuff himself into a septic tank and wait for death. It's not something you just don't see that. They did not have a crime scene. This is 10 years after he disappeared. There's no blood anywhere. There's no murder weapon. There is nothing. There is no witnesses to say they heard or saw something. Zilch. All they had was the fact that George O'Neill stole money and attempted to probably steal a lot more money from Cam after Cam vanished. Now, that would typically imply guilt, yes, but that is not enough to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. So they never had anything to go on. Sure, is it possible that maybe those two other caretakers killed Cam and George had no idea? I guess, but they're not the ones who benefited financially from Cam's disappearance. They didn't have anything in their bank accounts. They didn't have any transactions after Cam disappeared. Nothing like substantial. So, no one was ever charged with the murder of Cam Lyman. And in 2011, George O'Neill died of natural causes, taking whatever secrets he may have had about the murder of Cam to his own grave. It's just a very sad, depressing story, really, from beginning to end. You know, I feel like Cam never truly found his way in life. He never did exactly what he wanted to do, it doesn't sound like. And he just sort of became that kind of recluse of a person. And it's just, I don't know, it's just sad because ultimately he died alone and probably died without anyone in his life because if you believe George killed him, he had no friends in the end. And that's, I don't know, it's just awful. It's sad. I guess I just look at it as if you have family who is kind of becoming that way, the sort of hermit or just wants to keep to themselves. If you call them from time to time, check in on them. But maybe if you have the ability to, just go physically check on them. Go to their house once in a blue moon, once a month, maybe. Just if you don't hear from them, just go and make sure they're doing okay physically. Put eyes on them and make sure they're okay. Because you never know. And that's sort of the best way to end this is, sadly, we will never know anything about what happened. We will never know the truth to what happened to Cam Lyman. But that is it for this case, true crimerers. I hope you found it interesting. As I always say, if you do want to see a lot more cases from me, I have well over 2,000 videos over on my TikTok page. It is, I don't think it's all 2,000 videos or cases, but probably between 1,500 to 1,800 of them are cases that I've covered. So there's a lot more short form over there. I obviously have a ton of videos on YouTube now. I post 3 long videos a week, and I post several short videos throughout the week, as well as compilation videos from TikTok. So plenty of content to go around. Secondly, if you have a case you would like me to cover, please email me at mikey@truecrimerer.com. Please go to my link tree, which is linked just below in the description. Go to my crimerer case list in that link tree, scroll through the list, or do a Control F to find a name. Or if you're on a phone, use the 3 dots and then you can hit find and replace and then type the name. If you don't see the name you want me to cover on there, then email me just the name, where it happened, when it happened, and that should be good. If you do see the name, please do not email it to me again. It's already on there. I pick my cases at random, so it's just, you just gotta be patient with me in terms of when I cover it. It could be tomorrow, it could be 143 years from now when I am an undead zombie. If you want to support me in any way, that was aggressive, you can go to my merch store. My merch store is also in the link tree below. We sell t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, a wine glass. We sell a Christmas ornament for the next couple of weeks or so. If you want to hang my fat mug with a Christmas hat from your tree, go ahead. We ship internationally. So Adam, he makes my merch all himself. He will ship it wherever you are. Just be aware the shipping fees for international will be pretty obnoxious, as I'm sure you are aware. Lastly, if you have Discord and you would like to join my Discord server, I have one. It's a very chill, very relaxed server. It's not a crazy busy one like all the gaming ones. Some days it's quiet, some days there's lots of conversations, it just depends. But that's also linked in my link tree below. Please be over the age of 18. We have it set to basically you can't access it if you're under 18, but to those who are sneaky and get in and we see that you're under 18, we will boot you. Nothing personal, just want to keep it 18 plus, so yeah. All right, true crime Maroonies, that is it for today. So, ow, fuck, God, Jesus, tits on a cross. Oh God, who am I? Was I just severanced? Have you guys seen that show? It's so freaking